You ready?
Well, hello guys. It's great to see you guys all here today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself today, but don't worry, there's too many of you guys to ask how you guys are all doing today. Well, my name is... oh, sorry, I forgot. I am a super important person, and so I cannot tell you guys my name. I am so important because I am a leader in the Roman army. And you see, my role is super important. I am one of the greatest. I am a centurion, and I'm a centurion for the entire city of Jerusalem, and maybe even for the land of Judea. You see, I have tons and tons and tons of men that are underneath me. They belong to me. I am their leader, and I get to control them. But as Spider-Man once said, with great power comes great responsibility. But today is not about me. Today belongs to somebody else. And I'm going to tell you about a day that my life was changed forever. You see, way back when, you guys are too young to understand this, but I heard about this guy. And this guy, his name was Jesus. And because I had been in Israel and Judea for so long, I had heard all the rumors and the gossip I get to hear about. That was my job, is to know what is real and what is not. And so I've heard all these different things about this guy named Jesus. And so I had heard that he had been healing people. I had heard that he had been feeding tons and even thousands of people with just a few loaves of bread. He had been doing miracles. He was saying all these different things about himself and who he was in God. And I wanted to know more about this guy, just because I'm who I am, I like to learn a little bit more about people before I actually go and see them. So after gathering all this information, I realized Jesus was preaching today. Jesus was preaching over on the hill. It's only a 20-minute walk. I guess I can do it. And so I made my way over there, and I listened to Jesus talk. And what he was saying was really good. I was like, this is good stuff. What in the world? But because of my important job, I had to go back home, and I forgot about everything that I learned about from Jesus. And so, but from the inside of my heart, I knew that there was something different about this guy. All these people have been spreading all these different rumors on who Jesus was, but I wasn't sure. He could be who he says he is. He could be just this random guy. I've heard that he could be Elijah. I heard that he could be anyone. He could be a prophet. He could be God's son. I had heard all these rumors. I wasn't sure what to believe. And so a few months had gone by, and I was laying in bed. It was early one morning. It was like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And let me tell you, I am not a morning person. You wake me up in the morning, you better have a good reason, because I am grumpy. Grumpy, grumpy, grumpy. And so at 6 o'clock in the morning, I heard a knock on my door. So I was stuttering around, trying to feel my way. I went to the door, I opened it, and it was one of my soldiers. It was saying, Pilate wants to see you. Wait, Pilate? The guy that is the ruler of the entire area of Judea? He wants to see me? That woke me up. That at least there was a reason for me being woken up so early. So I went and I got myself all prepared. I put on my outfits. I put on my sword. I made sure I looked presentable. I made sure that I was clean. Everything I was wearing was not dirty. I washed my face even. And I booked it to the palace. And as I got there, I made sure that I had straightened my stuff. I had straightened my sword. I made sure I looked presentable. And I walked in, and there was Pilate. But Pilate wasn't alone. There was a guy with him. He looked slightly familiar from the back. But as I made my way towards Pilate, I realized this man was that Jesus guy. That guy that was preaching just a few months ago was here, right in front of Pilate. What is he doing here? Like, of all the places to be, I'm guessing being in front of Pilate was not the best choice. As I got closer, I noticed that his hair was a little tiffed, a little crooked, a little bit, looks like he hadn't gotten much sleep the night before. There was a couple of marks on his face, like he had been up all night and been in a fight. And I came around and I looked at Jesus' face, and he looked sullen. His face, he didn't have any emotions. And Pilate was asking him all these questions. And the only one that Jesus responded to was, yes, I am the Son of God. And so, as I was sitting there, I was like, dude, what are you doing? Of all the things to say to Pilate, you do know that he has the power to kill you? I mean, come on, just let's get this over with. That way you can go back to preaching your stuff and I can go back to living my life. But no, at this time, some crowds had formed outside the palace. I was like, oh man, we're going to have a riot on our hands. This is not good. And so Pilate was sitting there thinking, what am I going to do? And he looked at me and he said, Centurion, I want you to go get Barabbas from down in the prison. Barabbas? You mean the guy that's a murderer, who stole, who had committed adultery? He had done every single sin on the list. What in the world? Why would Pilate want me to go grab him? But I had to listen because he was my commander. So I went and I got Barabbas from the prison. I made sure that his chains were nice and tight on his feet and his legs because Barabbas was known to try to run away. And so I brought him up in front of Pilate, and there was Jesus too. And we walked outside to where the Jews and all these people had gathered outside the palace. And as they were standing there, on one side was Barabbas and on one side was Jesus. Pilate shushed the crowd. Shh! He said, I want you guys to be quiet. Since today is Passover, it's our tradition that we release one prisoner. And these are your two options. Over here is Barabbas. He has done every single thing that you possibly could do that was wrong. And over here is Jesus, who some people say is the King of the Jews. I want you guys to choose. Who do you want to be released today? The crowd went wild. They were just loud and so loud. But then I noticed that one of the religious leaders had started yelling, Barabbas, Barabbas. And this got the crowd so excited. They all started yelling, Barabbas, Barabbas, Barabbas. So what choice did we have? The people had chosen. They chose Barabbas over this Jesus. And so I took my key from my belt and I let Barabbas go. And he walked through the crowd, jumping and shouting and smiling because he had just gotten released from everything. This guy was condemned to die, but now he was free. Pilate still was standing in front of the people, and he's looking at Jesus. And he goes, what am I going to do with this guy? And the people started yelling, crucify him. Crucify him. In my heart, I was like, what? Why are they doing that? This guy obviously hasn't done anything wrong, except maybe going a bit too far over the line on what to say. This guy, I had never seen him do anything wrong. Instead, he was helping people all the time. Why were the people so upset with him? But the people had yelled, crucify him. And so Pilate took Jesus inside, and he gave him over to me, and he said, you know what to do. And so I took Jesus down to the place where they keep the prisoners, where they make the prisoners ready for being crucified. And my men were there. And they were laughing and they were making fun of him. They took off all of his clothes and they put on him a purple robe. And they put on his head a crown of thorns. And they were bowing down to him, just mocking him, hitting him, beating him. There was blood everywhere. Finally, I had enough. They had tortured this guy enough. So I said, stop it. This is enough. And I told my men to go grab a cross that was in the next room. And two of them dragged the cross into the room and they threw it on Jesus' back. He went down with the weight of the cross because he wasn't expecting it. And wearily and shakingly, he stood up with that cross on his back. And I was like, okay, we're ready to go. So I opened the gates to the prison, and Jesus and I walked to the place where he was going to be crucified. And along the way, I could tell that Jesus was struggling. I mean, as he was walking, he kept falling. He kept tripping. The blood that he had been shedding was running down the cross. It was running down him. I knew that if I didn't do something, Jesus would not be able to make it to the top of the hill. And so I looked around, and I saw there was a guy in the back corner. He looked buff. He had a couple of muscles going for him. And so I was like, hey, you, right there. You, come here. And he came, and I was like, I want you to carry this guy's cross. And he looked a little bit upset that I would ask him to do this. And he was trying to find every excuse possible to get out of doing it. But finally, I reached for my sword that was on my side, and finally he got the picture. He got that I was serious. And so he went down and he picked up the cross, and he carried the cross for Jesus all the way to the top of the hill. When we reached the top of the hill, the two other prisoners had already been crucified and were up on their crosses. And so, being that I was a centurion, it was my job to nail Jesus to the cross. So I took the stake and I took my hammer and I started nailing his hands and his feet to the cross. But there was something different about him. He didn't cry out in anger like the one guy was, and he wasn't begging for mercy like the other guy on the other side of Jesus. There was something different, and I couldn't place my finger on what that was. And so after I had nailed his hands and his feet to the cross, some of my soldiers thought it would be funny to put a sign above him that says, "Here's Jesus, King of the Jews," above his head. And so we elevated the cross till it was upright, and he was standing there on the cross. And at this point, it was about the 6th hour, and it got dark. It was kind of weird, not gonna lie. It usually doesn't get dark about that time, but whatever, I can't control the weather. And so as I stood there, it was my job to make sure that no one came near Jesus. And so as I was looking out across the crowd, I could see the people that were angry. They were hooting and hollering, saying, "Woo!" because Jesus was being crucified. But as I looked over in this direction, I could see the people, the followers of Jesus. I could easily pick out which one was Jesus' mom, because there was tears streaming down her face. I had done so many of these crucifixions before, but there was something different about this one. And so it was about the 9th hour. He had been up there for a good couple hours, and I could tell that something was different. Jesus began to talk to God. He yelled out to God, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He was so desperate. He sounded so alone and so lonely. And as I stood there watching this, my men behind me were mocking him. They're like, "Ha ha ha, why doesn't Elijah come and save you?" They would not stop making fun of him. And at that point, my men had taken off his clothes and started gambling them away. They were placing lots and rolling dice to see who would get Jesus' clothes. Didn't they respect this guy who had done nothing wrong? But I guess I wasn't able to tell them not to. And so as the evening progressed, Jesus said he was thirsty. I looked around. I couldn't find anything except some vinegar in the corner. So I yelled at one of my guys that were making fun of Jesus, "Hey, I want you to grab a sponge and a stick, dip in the vinegar, and give it to Jesus." And so he did that. And Jesus took a drink. And right after that, Jesus said one thing that changed my life forever. He said, "Lord, I commit my spirit to you." And he took his last breath, and his head hung down. Never before. I had seen so many crucifixions, so many that I had become numb to it. But instead, this was the first time I had ever heard someone say, "I commit my spirit." It was like he had a part to play in this, and that there was something different. Something inside of me changed in that moment. I looked up and I saw this man, and I said, "Surely this man is who he said he is. Surely he is the Son of God." A few hours later, the other two prisoners on both sides, they were still alive. And so they came over and they broke his legs. But as they went over to Jesus, I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. He is already dead. And just to make sure of it, they took him down from the cross, and I took my spear, and I put it through his side, and out flowed blood and water. This was a sure sign that Jesus had died. And so I ran. One of my men had run up to me and said, "Pilate wants to see you." Again? Didn't he just realize that I had just gone through a crucifixion? Whatever. So I ran to the palace, and Pilate was there with a few men. And he asked me, is Jesus dead? And I said yes. I went home that night and I was so upset. I wanted to know more about this Jesus fellow. Why was he so important? What was so different about him? And so as I began to think about this, it had been about 3 days, and all of a sudden there was a commotion outside my room. I was like, what in the world? Apparently some guy had stolen Jesus' body, but I knew something different had happened. This man was Jesus. He was God's son. I was positive that Jesus, instead of being stolen, had raised from the dead. And that is the day that I believed in Jesus. And do you want to know what, guys? Today, you guys can believe in Jesus. There's 3 simple steps that you guys can do to welcome him into your life. Maybe you're saying to yourself, there's something different about this Jesus. I want to know more. Or maybe you're saying, there's some Christians in my life, and the way they act, there's something different. What is it? And right now, I have 3 things that I want you guys to do. The first thing is, if you're wanting to start this relationship with God, you first have to admit that you have done things wrong in your life. Admit that there is sin and mistakes, and that there's nothing that you can do about that. The second one is believe. Believe in Jesus. Believe that he came to the earth, he lived a perfect life, and that he died for our sins. And the third one is say with your mouth, I believe in Jesus. So we're going to pray, and if you want to accept Jesus, raise your hands.